And they're writing to the Rabbi for advice. And letter after letter, the Rabbi is taking these abstract Torah ideas and bringing it down to their individual emotional experience. And I was just eating these letters up. You know, they felt like they were talking to me. And I started seeing things, tools, directions, perspectives, and I started to try to implement them in my life. So I tried to stay cognizant to the best of my ability to allow the book to be resonant with every reader. I was very open that it's coming from Jewish Hasidic background, but the advice I feel is universal. So Benjamin recalled, regarding my Jewish patients, he said that I should tell them that following the Holocaust, with so many millions of our people murdered, those alive today have a double duty. They must live not only for themselves, but also for those who are not here. When they reflect on this, they will find their own turmoil to be easier to deal with. Regarding my patients who aren't Jewish, the Rabbi said I must explain to them that they have duties in this world, they have obligations in this world. All human beings are mandated by the Torah to fulfill the 7 laws of Noah.
Content presented in Cheshire Corners is for educational and informational purposes only. Please consult a legal professional if you have any questions or concerns about the content of this disclaimer, this series, or the legal implications surrounding psychedelic substances in your jurisdiction.
And what I find so unique was we have Rabbi Levi, who collected 13,000 letters, which was not everything, but a part of all the letters of a mental and emotional health that the Rebbe wrote. All different languages, Hebrew, English, Russian, French. Put them all together and try to offer an approach. The Rebbe's approach based on Torah, based on Jewish texts towards this important topic. And composed this beautiful book called Letters for Life, which I personally read and found it extremely informative and extremely an amazing, really a beautiful work. And be able to purchase the book right after the event and have Levi sign it as well. And while Levi talks about this important topic and his book and all the things in between, we'll have Rabbi Gelman in moderation, to bring out those important questions, to bring out those important topics, and really what the crux of the issue is and the crux of the solution. And hopefully it will bring for entertaining, a learned, and an informative night. So thank you all. And thank you, Rabbi Gelman and Denver Kilo, for joining us. And without further ado.
Thank you, Rabbi Sirota. It's always good to have Rabbi Gelman in moderation. That is definitely a good idea. I want to, as the Gemara says, Potin b'chvod achsanya. We begin with thanking our host. So I want to thank Rabbi Sirota for inviting the Denver Kehila to participate and inviting me to moderate this discussion with Rabbi Shmutkin. I want to echo Rabbi Sirota's being a fan of this book. I also really enjoyed reading this book. I think I enjoyed the footnotes more because there are more letters in the footnotes, and if you're able, you could access the original Hebrew or English or Yiddish on various websites. Many of these letters are collected in ways that are accessible, and I learned a lot from them, and I'm really excited to introduce these letters to our community through our conversation. We hope to have about a 40-minute conversation, and then we'd like to open it up to questions from you. So I think, Rabbi, let's begin with your background. Maybe share with us a little bit about your educational and personal background and how that may have led you to this project specifically.
So first of all, thank you, Rabbi Sirota, and thank you, Rabbi Gelman, for beautiful introductions. I studied in traditional yeshiva education, studying Gemara, Rishonim, and the Hasidic masters. I grew up in a Chabad family, so one step closer, I think, to these letters. But despite all that, I didn't really spend much time reading these letters. I was primarily studying classic Jewish text, And even if I did study teachings from the Rabbi, I was studying more of his Talmudic analysis or his Parsha explanations, and the letters were just, on the shelf. Fast forward, I'm, doing my time in yeshiva. I think I had a relatively good time in yeshiva, and in my later teens, I think as it happens to many of us, I'm sitting there studying, and all of a sudden this inner world starts tugging at me. And for the first time, I'm sitting in the study hall, and I'm sitting in the lecture hall, and I'm trying to listen, I'm trying to focus academically, just as I've been doing for the last, 10 years of my life, and my head's not there. And I'm having a hard time waking up in the morning. And I didn't know what's happening with myself. And I started becoming more, inner focused and starting to feel a little isolated. And that's when I knew that I need to stop and I need to find something in Jewish wisdom, something deeper, that spiritual power that talks to the inner world, that talks to the thoughts, that talks to the feelings. I never thought I would be in that position, right? But here I am. And that's when I reached out and I found this corner of the shelves that is this 33 volumes of letters of the rabbis. And they're private letters, private personal letters to individuals. Some of them are communal matters, but a lot of them are very personal matters. You have a mother having her first child. You'll have someone in middle age. You'll have a teenager that's just having fear of people struggling socially. And they're writing to the Rabbi for advice. And letter after letter, the Rabbi is taking these abstract Torah ideas and bringing it down to their individual emotional experience. And I was just eating these letters up. They felt like they were talking to me. And I started seeing things, tools, directions, perspectives. And I started to try to implement them in my life. This is all as I'm in yeshiva, nothing, I don't think anyone really realized. I was kind of embarrassed about maybe what I'm feeling, but my heart and my mind were totally obsessed with this letters. And that's what was the genesis of the project and ultimately led to the book.
So this is a very personal project for you. This is not some detached academic exercise. This feels like these letters were a lifeline for you and help you find yourself in a way, which I guess brings me to my second question. What kind of reader did you have in mind when you decided to write this book? And also explain how someone unfamiliar with the Rebbe's teachings and Rebbe's writings would or could connect to a book like this.
So I tried to stay cognizant to the best of my ability to allow the book to be resonant with every reader. I was very open that it's coming from Jewish Hasidic background, but the advice I feel is universal. And there's actually been many non-Jewish fans who've reached out about, how they're finding these teachings talking to their soul. And I believe you don't need background because the universal emotional experience is the same. I think we all have the same fears. At the core of it, the crux of it, takes on different clothing, but the underlying feeling is the same. And the Torah transcends ages, and I believe, and time and space. And the core ideas of the Torah talk to the core human experience in its purity. So I think, honestly, it's universal, and I tried as much, the best of my ability, that it should be transmitted in that way. So
the Rebbe's ability to distill Torah, you feel he was able to do in a way which speaks to multitudes of people in different situations of life, Jewish, non-Jewish, and that's the power of these letters.
Yeah, so some letters do use Jewish terminology if they're writing to a rabbi or they're writing to someone with a yeshiva background. So in the book, I try to give some context for those phrases, but the core ideas, I think, apply universally.
You mentioned before people with no background. I'm very fond of something I heard the Rabbi once say when someone came to him and said, I want to start a program to educate Jews without a background. And he said, there's no such thing as a Jew without a background. Every Jew is a son of Abraham and Sarah. So they have a background. So he made the person find a new term, like beginner or something like that.
It's a true story. It's Mr. Roy. He actually still today as a beginner's minion in the KJ.
Right, George Rohr.
So yeah,
right.
True story.
The Rebbe wrote, well, you distilled 13,000, but there are tens of thousands, maybe more. How many letters are there?
I don't know if we have a count. I think that what we know of it's kind of somewhat accessible, about 20,000, but we know that's only a small portion of them.
So how did you even begin the process of selecting which letters you wanted to include in this volume?
That was honestly, that was one of the brutal parts of the project. And that's partially why, as you mentioned, the endnotes, why they're so long. Because there was these letters that I just loved, absolutely extraordinary letters, but I was trying to keep the chapters, respect the time of the reader, and have every line in the chapter be full and no redundancy. And here I am torn between wanting to put in another letter, but knowing that for the flow of the chapter, I think it's better if it's out. So I just decided I can't take this out. So I just put in the endnotes. And then that's another letter. But ultimately what tipped the scale, I think, was letters that I was able to find some of the narrative, some of the background, whether it had a lead. Someone tipped me off that maybe this is a letter to their grandmother. So I was able to speak to their grandmother or to their children. And what I found is that for reading purposes and for connecting, you want to know the person who it's to. You want to know what they were going through in their words. And you want to also hear the follow-up of what happened, when that advice was integrated in the person's life. So whenever I had that would take, the upper hand in terms of what I chose to include. But all the letters are beautiful.
So there was quite a bit of detective work. So it sounds like some of the letters came with notes which helped with the background, but some of them were just, dear so-and-so, and then you were able to do some research to understand the backstory, which helped place them specifically within the context of the book.
Correct. I would say the vast majority of letters are anonymous. So I have no idea. There's sometimes, interesting side note, but there is a tradition in some Jewish communities that at the bar mitzvah or wedding celebrations, you put out a memento with precious documents of the family. And a lot of times people who receive letters from the Rebbe would include it in their mementos. So there's some detective work that was done. Some of it have been done people before me of, hunting down these mementos. And then over there you have a lead because there's a name, right? So you have a name, so you know, okay, I know who this is to. Let me see if I can speak to them or to their family members to get some of the context. But actually most letters I don't know the background. You could try to, but yeah.
But sometimes maybe the Rebbe would repeat the question that was asked or offer some background in the letter. That helped you decide to put that letter in. Correct. Because you had the backstory.
Correct. I will actually mention just another tangent. I got an email from someone and they said, I was reading your book. She's a psychiatrist and I'm reading and I'm looking in the endnotes. And I bumped into a letter that was written to my mom about me. Call me. I'm like, whoa, okay.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and she gives me this background story. It's a crazy story. It's just a crazy, crazy story that she went through. And she told me many more details. I can't really share it because it's somebody will be identifying. But she was crying, and she was telling me how this letter literally held her through the most difficult times in her life.
Is she a Chabad chassid, this woman?
She actually came from a non-Chabad background. I think today, because of the letter's impact on her life, she feels closer to the Rebbe and Chabad community. But it's an extraordinary story. And she actually sent me the last version of the letter meaning her mother's, and I see a few handwritten edits that weren't in the letter that I had in the endnotes. The time will come that she'll let me share it with the whole background story. But anyway, it was just a fascinating experience.
Yeah.
I might be able, maybe if I think about it, there might be some parts I can take out that are not identifying, but let's continue for now.
Could you explain to us why people thought that the Rebbe was the proper address for their emotional, psychological issues, instead of going to a psychiatrist or a social worker or a psychologist? Do you think that this is common in Chassidut in general, that people see their Rebbe as fulfilling this role, or is it something unique that the people found in the Rebbe and they turned to him?
I think I would say a few things to the question. First of all, when you read the letters, these are mostly letters 50s, 60s, 70s. People are not writing in the way like, I have PTSD, Rabbi. What should I do? People are writing more, I think, on a common level experience. Rabbi, I'm feeling fear. Rabbi, I'm worried, right? Rabbi, I'm sad. And I don't think it was kind of like, oh, I need a psychologist, let me go to the Rebbe. People were operating, some of these people are Holocaust survivors. It's a different generation, a different way of thinking. And I write in the introduction that this is not a book that addresses mental illness in any way. Thankfully, when I was coming at the human experience where we have aloneness, we have frustration, we have disappointment, we have discontent, we have lower moods, we have discouragement on the baseline. The Rebbe did send people quite often to psychologists and psychiatrists, I will mention, when there was illness. So I just want to say on the outset, in terms of why people wanted to turn to the Rebbe, I think, you can explain many reasons for that, but something very powerful in the Rebbe's way of communicating, I found, is the confidence that emanates in his writing, in the ability of all of us to heal and to be strong and to stand on our 2 feet. And I feel this comes from an unshakable faith in God, which translates into an unshakable faith in the human being's inner, healthy, wholesome, and beautiful soul. And at the bottom of all the illness, or at the bottom of the different frustration and struggles, there's a part of you that's healthy, there's a part of you that's whole, there's a part of you that's strong. And because of that, he had a certain confidence in his writing to people, and a certain trust in their ability to transcend, and their ability to pick up and lead a healthy life and a healthy inner self again. And it's so healing to speak to someone, to get a letter from someone who believes in you and believes in your ability to be healthy and believes in your ability to live joy, not just happily, but actually joyfully in an extraordinary way. So I think that's something that people really appreciated.
So it sounds like part of the power of these letters is the confidence, as you said, the Rebbe had in people, that they weren't as broken as they themselves felt they were. And just hearing that from a figure like the Rebbe was a major step in the right direction in terms of their emotional healing. That's very powerful. Okay, let's turn to some of the actual letters. So there's a chapter titled "See Others," and I found something that appears to be counterintuitive within the letter, and I was hoping that you could explain the Rebbe's path. The Rebbe counseled many people to turn to helping others when they themselves were undergoing a difficult period. So, for example, and I'm quoting here, the Rebbe writes, "Many people whose life experiences are similar to yours with regard to suffering have found relief through regularly and consistently devoting their energy, time, and emotional attention to assisting others who find themselves in distress or in a state of confusion." So that's the Rebbe's advice. He continues, this is on page 6, this has helped them perceive and value their life in an entirely new way. So this is part of the confidence measure, I think, where the Rebbe is saying, not only are you not broken, but you could actually help someone else, which is maybe not what the person was expecting to hear. But I'd like to ask 2 questions about this. First, how does this differ from a more traditional approach? And you mentioned the Rebbe did send people to psychologists, psychiatrists. How does this differ from the more traditional approach of seeking therapy, where we turn attention to our troubles? Right? The Rebbe here is saying, don't pay so much, it sounds like he's saying, don't pay so much attention to your own difficulties. Pay more attention to someone else's trouble, help them, and you'll be able to heal, which is not what we do in therapy. Right? When we go to therapy, we focus on our own problems. So maybe an example on page 9, he writes that the Rebbe told a disciple that many of our young people, they analyze themselves too much. So maybe talk a little bit about that, other examples, and your own understanding of why the Rebbe sort of flipped the script of what would we maybe consider traditional therapeutic methods.
It's a great question. One thing I want to emphasize about this, and I think talks to this question, is that what you see in these responses of the Rebbe, that he's counseling people to help others, to help themselves and their inner state, there's an emphasis always to turn their mind and their emotional attention to others, not just to do the act of helping, but to expand their feelings, to be able to see. That's why I titled the chapter "See Others, Not Help Others," because I thought that was a very, very critical part of the medicine here, is to be able to see others. And I want to go back to my personal experience for a second, because this is a very, very powerful part of, I think, what helped me in my state there. You know, I grew up in a Chabad family, and helping others, I thought was part of kind of my life and part of the way I was. I was a nice person, I thought, you know, whatever. And then when I'm finding myself in this darker hole, and I'm reading these letters from the Rebbe, and I'm reading this counseling from the Rebbe, and he's talking about seeing others. He's talking about take a minute, take 5 minutes, take 10 minutes, pause everything in your life. I know you're feeling horrible. I know you're feeling like crap. Pause, just for 10 minutes, and think about the person sitting next to you. Think about how their health is. Think about how they're feeling. Think about how their finances are. Is there anything you can do to make their life a little bit better? And when I started doing this, I said, you know what, I'm going to try. This is hard as a leap of faith, because when you feel down, you feel the most like you feel like you're ignoring yourself if you're going to even take 10 minutes. I mean, what's going to be with me, right? So, you know, I'm going to take a leap of faith. I'm going to try this medicine. And what I realized when I started doing it is that even though I thought, you know, this is part of my life and helping other people, I haven't actually done this before, where I stop thinking about myself and I literally think about someone else's life and what's going on in their life journey, right? I have my life journey, but how's their life journey with their journeying right near me? But I never really took the emotional attention and mental space to properly consider their life. And when you do that, you all of a sudden start noticing, this is something the Rebbe writes. He says, when you'll start thinking, you'll notice some areas where they probably can use your help. He said, don't think about, oh, how can I help you? How can I push myself on you right now? No, start doing the act of realizing, seeing others, realizing there's someone else's journey on the side near you. Think about their life journey. And then you'll oftentimes see somewhere where, you know what, I think they can use my help directly, indirectly, emotionally, physically. And why am I mentioning this? First of all, I think it's important when we're thinking about this to understand that it's a deeper medicine. It's not just a medicine that's practical, although it's also about actually helping others, but it's about inner work of expanding our thinking. And I saw such a transformative impact over the course of a few months, where every day in, day out, I'm taking this medicine of putting myself on pause and thinking about the person sitting next to me. And slowly it has an impact during the day. It percolates where your brain and your heart, they move out a little bit. They move out of that hole and they become healthier. But why am I saying all this in response to your question is because it's important to understand about this counseling point of the Rebbe. It's not about it's not about ignoring yourself, putting yourself on the side. It's actually a lot of inner work that I think people don't realize. But if you study the letters, you see it's always about expand your thoughts, expand your feelings. And that is healthy, it's integrated, it's part of you. And you're taking all that emotional energy that we have, and instead of being enslaved to it, instead of suppressing it, you're expanding it. So I think it differs from some therapeutic models. I'm not sure it differs from all of them, but it also differs from the old way of just totally ignoring yourself. It's an inner work where it's taking that spirit and trying to integrate it in our thoughts and feelings. It's a long-winded answer, but I hope that talks to your question.
No, that's great. Those are important nuances in terms of doing the inner work while which will then lead you maybe to the ability to discover what someone else may need, while at the same time increasing your self-worth and your belief in yourself. So that's an important nuance, and I appreciate that you mentioned that. And you also, my next question was going to be if the Rebbe recommended traditional therapy for folks, which you already said he did. So now I want to turn to chapter 11, which is entitled Transcend Isolation, which I really, really enjoyed and learned a lot in this chapter. It's a chapter that focuses on advice from the Rebbe centering around the realization that whatever problems we are facing, or whatever problems the writer of the letter is facing, there are definitely others who have similar struggles. So my first question, I have two questions on this general approach. Can you explain, based on the Rebbe's letters, and maybe you could share something specific about one or two of them, why he thought that this approach would help people cope? This explanation to others that, whatever you're a first-time mother, whatever you're feeling, it's likely every first-time mother has also felt this way. Why did the Rebbe feel that this was helpful?
So I think as a broader theme, which talks a little bit to the point we were talking about earlier, and this is my own words, but it seems to me that the Rebbe believes that the mother of illness is isolation. When we get lost in our minds and we slowly seclude ourselves mentally, emotionally, feeling that we're on our island of our own, and consistently the Rebbe tries to bring back a person in context, in connection with God, in connection with their soul, in connection with helping others, and in connection with the realization that this is part of the human experience. You're not crazy. You're not alone. You're not on an island that no one has ever been to. He doesn't say, I don't think he says that everyone has had this. No, he says you should know that a lot of people, more people than you may have imagined, experience this. I remember a letter to a couple who was having some tension in their marriage, and the Rebbe said, among other things, the Rebbe said to get marriage counseling. He recommended other things to do for the marriage. He also said you should know that more than you realize, people in their marriages have tension, and that's okay. Obviously, it's not what we hope for, but if a tension, it heals, you continue having a great, loving marriage. And for obvious reasons, people are not going to talk about it in the shul the next day. And so you may think that you're an anomaly and this is horrible, and you're both horrible people, and there's no way, your failure at marriage and at being a human being, this is what happened. So many of us go through this, and it's okay. And that just takes away some of the power that the incident or that the struggle has over you, where it makes you that voice, where it makes you feel like you're this crazy person or this unnormal, unnatural person. So I think that's part of why it's so healing.
I think it also takes away shame.
Yeah, shame.
Also, even I think especially in traditional societies, these type of challenges, sometimes we don't talk about them. Sometimes they bring shame. And when the Rebbe or someone you respect tells you that, and from his perspective, he's seen hundreds and hundreds of people in counseling and in other circumstances, it removes that shame, which is often a big barrier to healing. Is there a specific letter, a favorite, that you want to share and explain why you think it resonates or why it was moving to you? You've opened up quite a bit about your own personal experience, so maybe something in that sphere, but just a letter that stands out for you.
So interestingly enough, actually, there's one letter that always stood out to me for myself and in the book. I put in the beginning of the book, and I was actually speaking to the Jewish Journal in LA, and they asked, give me one letter and I mentioned this letter. I didn't know the background of the letter. A few months ago, I was driving, and I got a phone call, and on the other line's a rabbi I never spoke to, and he introduces himself, and he says, I love your book, but there's one letter in there that seems to me you don't have the background for it. I want to tell it to you. And he starts telling me that a few years ago, he was watching an auction house, and he sees 3 letters, English letters from the Rebbe, go up for sale. And obviously he's very interested. He puts in a bid, he gets it. And the seller was this older woman who said this is letters to her brother who recently passed without children. And she starts telling him the background. He was a student at Harvard University in the 1960s, the early 60s. And, to everyone around him, he seems like the successful, what could be better? He's at one of the most prestigious universities in the world. He's doing well academically. He's doing well socially. He's doing well, everything's going for him. And nevertheless, his inner world is starting to crumble, and he starts experiencing a lot of self-doubt, and he's questioning he's thinking of his relationships in his past and his childhood and his future and his career prospects, and he starts feeling a lot of fear, and darker thoughts start eating at him, and it's slowly drawing him into this black hole. And he starts feeling isolated to the point that he was having so much inner pain, and he admitted himself to the Mental Health Institute of Harvard at the time. And this woman is telling the rabbi that from the institute, he's sitting here in the early 1960s in Boston in this horrid position in life, and he writes this long autobiographical letter to the Rebbe, explaining everything about himself, his going back to his past, his upbringing, his family, his high school, his college, and the mess that he is today. And he says he doesn't understand it. He doesn't know what's happening. It's hurting so much. And he asked the Rebbe, Rebbe, what is a pathway that can help me? What's going on with me, and how can I help myself get out of this darkness? And I'll make a longer story short. It's an extraordinary story, but the Rabbi responds to him, and this is a letter that I saw because this rabbi took out the identifying details and published it after he bought the letters. But I didn't know the background. And the Rabbi begins his letter, and he says that the answer to your letters, the answer to your conundrum, is actually in your own letter. If you look at your letter again, you will see. But it's not in anything you wrote. It's actually in what you didn't write. And the Rebbe zooms out, and this is actually, I think he was a student of physics. He was a brilliant scientist. And the Rebbe tells him there's a key idea in Jewish wisdom that actually modern science consistently finds again and again in the structure of the universe. And that is this idea of reciprocal relationship of giving and receiving. That every being in the universe and in the ecological system plays a dual role. We're all receivers. Nobody can live alone, and nobody lives on an island. A tree, it needs soil, it needs water, it needs sunlight. An animal, it needs shelter, it needs nutrition. Nothing just lives. We're all receivers, whether we like it or not. But alongside that, every being in nature, if you analyze it, if you observe it, if you think about it, also plays a role as a contributor, also plays a role as a giver. It gives something specific back to its surroundings. So the tree will give oxygen, it'll give shelter, it'll give fruits, right? The bee will take nectar, it'll give honey. I was actually in Nanaimo, which is in Victoria Islands. Anyone has been there? It's in British Columbia. So, and I was speaking to a scientist there about this theme in this letter. And I asked her if she has any examples to me of this reciprocal taking, giving reality in nature, which again is a root idea of Jewish mysticism, but we're fun. And she says, so she professes, and actually she's living on an island, she professes in the sea world. That's her scientific interest. And she told me that what comes to mind is there's this interesting give and take relationship between big fish and small fish. Where big fish, sharks, many of them sharks, they have stuff that comes on their teeth and their mouth that when it stays there for a long time, it kills them or it makes them very sick. And small fish come inside the mouths of the big fish or the sharks, and they eat all that stuff in the teeth. And for the small fish, that's actually their nutrition. That's actually their what gives them sustenance. And the sharks not only don't eat them, they kind of let them, they like pull back in their massive jaws, and they let these small fish just do their dental work on their teeth. And she says, and this to her was a perfect example of this reciprocal harmony of nature, where the big fish are giving food to the small fish and in turn receiving dental work. And the small fish are giving health to the big fish and in turn receiving their food. So you kind of have this taking, giving reality that the Rebbe was describing to the scientist in the letter, bear out in the SeaWorld. I thought it was a fascinating side note there. So the Rebbe explains this to him. And then he says, the same is true about human beings. That in the inherent design, the way God created us to be, we're all supposed to be dual players. We're supposed to receive. That's the way Hashem created us. We have family, we have friends, we have educators. We must receive. We do receive. But in our inherent design, we're also supposed to play a role as an active givers, active contributors. Thinking about the people in our surroundings, our community, our society, and to actively and consciously work in our role to give to them, to enhance their life, to enhance our surroundings. But because we have free choice, we sometimes forget about our role as receivers, as givers, and we could become consumed with our role as takers. And subconsciously, we'll start measuring everything in our surroundings and everything in our life from the angle of being a receiver. How much are my friends giving me the love that I want, that I need even? How much is my family giving me the respect that I deserve? How much is my work meeting what I need to receive? And it's fair, there's a part of our life that we are receivers. But we could become so consumed by that part of ourselves, and that could become the center of our thinking, that we lose touch with our conscious and active duty and task and design to be active givers. And when that happens, the Rebbe writes in, as a law of nature, we're going to feel a lot of emotional pain. We may not know why, but at the core of it is this dissonance between how we're living and the inherent design of the way every creature is supposed to be in nature. And then the Rebbe tells him, he says, I want you to look at your letter that you wrote to me. It's a long autobiographical letter about everything about yourself. And you'll realize, you'll notice that in all those lines and paragraphs that you wrote so articulately, such an articulate way, you didn't write anything about what you are doing actively in your role as a giver. You didn't write anything in a mind frame, in a way of thinking of, okay, there's everything that I need, and I need them, and those needs need to be met. And you read in other parts of the book, the Rebbe was very into that. We all have needs that need to be met. We didn't write anything about your thinking about the person sitting next to you, about your friend, about your classmate, about your family, about your parents, about your siblings. And what are you doing in your role as a giver? What are you doing in your role as reciprocating whatever you receive to enhance someone else's life, to enhance the community, to enhance your family and your friends? And the Rebbe says, I think that is honestly why you're hurting so deeply. And the key to your health, and I'll read to you a few lines of this letter because it's so powerful, it's pretty strong. And I'll finish the story in a second. And the Rebbe writes to him like this. This is where he really says, you are much too wrapped up with yourself, with your own emotions and feelings and aspirations. You must get away from yourself and begin to think of others. It is time to begin an active participation in society. To give, I give generously. The opportunities are many and the need is great. And I remember this letter very vividly in my life, but just to finish the story, and again, I'm trying to condense it, there's so much more to this that helps understand why I asked the rabbi if he knows whatever happened to this young man. And he says, he did a lot of research. He was obviously very curious. And he found out that he got out of his darker place and he actually had a beautiful, extraordinary career as a professor, a very prominent professor in his specific area of science that taught classes and classes of university students who loved him. And in 1994, when the Rebbe passed away, he heard from someone who knew him. He said this professor was crying like a baby. He was crying like a baby. And in his regular life, he didn't seem traditional. He didn't seem connected Jewishly. So this friend who was in Iowa, he asked him, why are you crying so bitterly? It's sad that a great Jewish leader died, but okay. He says, you don't understand. He said, for so many others, the Rebbe was this great Jewish teacher. For me, I was in the darkest place of my life, right? And this Rebbe, this rabbi in Brooklyn understood that what I needed to hear was not a pat on the back I was not to dig deeper in all those paragraphs and lines, but actually I needed to open up a new window in my brain. I needed to expand my self-perception. I needed to believe in myself that I could be a giver, and therefore I should be a giver, and therefore I must be a giver. And only by taking all that pent-up energy and allowing it to get back in touch with my role as a giver and consciously think about what I could do and therefore must do to enhance the lives of all the people in my surroundings, that was the key and path to my health. So that's one letter that comes to mind.
That is a remarkable story and a great way for us to end this part of the presentation. Thank you, Rabbi, so much for joining us. I did want you to answer how you think the Rebbe would think of your book, but that may take us too far afield. Maybe we'll get back to that at the end. I'd like to open up the floor for questions. Just clarifying, questions are not comments. Questions are questions. So, yes.
Yeah, how did you get those 10,000 letters? I mean, he sent those out to people, so did you have to put an ad in the paper saying, "You have a rabbi's letter"?
It's a great question. So for many years, actually, those letters were not accessible. In the 80s, beginning in the 80s, the big project was launched to collect these letters. And actually, that project is still ongoing. They're only up to the 70s. They started, the main letters begin in 1950. And now I think they're holding 76, 77. We need letters till 1992. So it's a long, ongoing process of collecting these letters. But primarily, so I came off the work of other collectors. Some of them the biggest collection is obviously this published chronological collection. There are some more private collectors that have done their own investigative work and tried to convince people who've got letters to share their letters with them so they can share with others. I mentioned, I think, about the memento tradition. So that's another way of getting letters. So the short answer is I owe a lot to the work of people before me in collecting these letters as a primary source, and then I was able to kind of study them in depth and try to see the key principles. I did do some finding letters myself, but mostly I owe it to others.
That's a really great question. I was talking about this book with some friends, and I assumed that at some point the Rebbe kept a duplicate of every letter he sent. Did that, at some point, was that happening?
So yes, it's a good point. I do think there was duplicates of letters that were made. I don't know the exact. I have to look into that historically. How much of those duplicates were made accessible? It's a very interesting thing. It happens to be historically that in the few months leading up to the Rebbe's stroke in 1992, the Rebbe was taking many, many boxes of letters and burning them. Yeah. And the Rebbe's office used to have piles and piles of boxes of documents and letters, and I'm sure a lot of them obviously probably personal things with people. And in the months before his stroke, the Rebbe was sending boxes just to get burnt. And when the Rebbe had his stroke, the room was clean; it was empty. So nobody will ever know what was in there. But that's just an interesting historical anecdote.
Dr. Fishman, did you have a question?
Are there more letters in there that where the Rebbe deals with the problem of suicide?
There isn't a letter, but there is a private audience with a psychologist named Dr. Ruth Benjamin. I could just read. So this is something that I got from an interview with her. It wasn't an interview that I conducted, but it's a transcript of an interview with her. I can just read to you where I can reference you where it is, but this is what she recalls, and I'll read it to you. It's in the end of chapter 3. Okay. It's a few paragraphs here. So, Ruth Benjamin was born to Christian parents and raised in South Africa. In her 20s, she converted to Judaism and later developed a relationship with the Rebbe. A clinical psychologist by profession, she consulted the Rebbe on how to counsel patients who question the value of their life. And you'll see in a second. So Benjamin recalled, regarding my Jewish patients, he said that I should tell them that following the Holocaust, with so many millions of our people murdered, those alive today have a double duty. They must live not only for themselves, but also for those who are not here. When they reflect on this, they will find their own turmoil to be easier to deal with. That's no. Regarding my patients who aren't Jewish, the Rebbe said I must explain to them that they have duties in this world, they have obligations in this world. All human beings are mandated by the Torah to fulfill the 7 laws of Noah, the 7 ethical principles given to all humankind to ensure a society of justice and kindness. But here is the I cited an example of a suicidal patient of mine who wasn't Jewish, whom I managed to get to the hospital in time, saving his life, right? She got this, I guess she got a phone call, a frantic phone call, and she managed to stop him in the last minute. Afterwards, he came to me and said, "You are responsible for me being alive. Now give me something to live for." Do we have any psychologists in the rooms? No. Okay. So I had not known how to answer him, and I asked the Rebbe what I should say to a patient like this. This is what she recalls, short. "Tell him that he is part of God's world," the Rebbe responded. "And that means he has to answer to God." That's the end of the story, as she recalls it.
It really fits into what we said, what we've been speaking about, that everyone has a purpose, everyone can be a giver, everyone is capable of helping others.
But I want to share something just connected to this that I found fascinating. I was sitting at a Shabbat table somewhere, and the man sitting next to me, I started chatting him up, older gentleman, and so what he does, he is the lead psychologist for the American Army in Africa. And he told me that in his role as a lead psychologist, there's so many things going on with the military personnel, and when you're dealing with the air, it's a lot of them are married, and there's families, and it's a whole universe. So he says because he's in this senior role and the top psychologist, he only gets called in by the most critical cases. So and a lot of times that's suicidal, right? This critical, urgent case, SOS, they bring him in. But he was just sharing with me. And I asked him, I said, "What do you say in that moment? What do you say in that?" I'm so interested to hear what you say. And this man is completely not traditional, like in any metric. I don't think he's married to a Jewish person. He was Jewish himself, but I'm saying he seemed completely secular. And he told me that he asks the person if they believe in God. And if he gets a yes, he says, "God put you here for a reason." And I was floored. I would never imagine that the lead psychologist of the American armies, this is at the moment of truth, literally says the same words that the Rebbe told this psychologist in South Africa to say. So that was just, for me, was an interesting merging of worlds. Comes back to your professional. So just an interesting anecdote.
Okay, we'll take one more question, and afterwards, everyone's invited to refreshments in the back.
And books, if they want.
And yes, and books.
One question was, did he handwrite all these letters himself, or did he have help with that? And the other, in giving so much to so many people, did he look after himself? And if so, how?
The first question is easier for you to answer. The second question I need to think about, but I'll think about it maybe when I get to the... So in answer to the first question, great question. It's interesting how that actually shifted over the years, and I'll explain in a second, and probably the other way than you would think. So in the 50s and 60s and 70s, most of the letters are typewritten letters and a letterhead, what you would imagine when you're thinking of a letter. And those letters, as far as I understood, I was just sharing this with someone else, was the Rebbe would read all the incoming mail himself. He actually didn't want an envelope opener. He said, "People are closing these letters with tears. I'm not going to have a machine open the letters." And then he would dictate. There was a secretary who would come and take a tape, and the Rebbe would dictate responses. He would then go to his office, type out the response, and then he would come back, bring back the Rebbe the first draft. The Rebbe would edit it heavily. He would come back, retype it with the edits, and then bring it back to the Rebbe. Sometimes the Rebbe would edit it again. Sometimes if there was a lot of edits, he would bring it back again to type and again for edits. And if it was less edits, then the recipient would get the letter with the second round of edits. As time went on, and actually the secretaries couldn't keep up with the flow of mail and the flow of responses, what began more and more frequently was the Rebbe would respond handwritten on the margins of letters. And the secretary would call up, if you send a letter to the Rebbe, they would call up and say, "Hi, take out a pen and paper. Here is your response. Let me tell you the exact words that the Rebbe wrote on the margin of your letter." You know, if you're in New York, you're able to get called in and you're able to see it yourself. If you were overseas, you just had to copy the words so you know. And more that became, they didn't have time they couldn't keep up pace. So as the years go on, you have more and more of these handwritten responses, and they have a little bit of different energy. They're more dense, they're more concise, a lot of hyphenation, a lot of underlines, ways like denser writing where you're communicating a lot in less words. So it was interesting for me to study those. I have a personal pleasure in like deciphering the power in it, but so that happened more and more in the later years. So that's to your first question. And to your second question, I don't know. It's a hard question. I don't know. I could share with you what I heard from someone who was around 770 in the late 80s and early 90s, and this is when the Rebbe was in his own late 80s, right? In 1992, the Rebbe turned 90. So, and he said that he was happens to have been up late that night, probably 3, 4 a.m., and he knew that the Rebbe had a lot of mail. Now, until before the Rebbitzin passed away, the Rebbe would go home at night, a few blocks down. But after the Rebbitzin passed away, the Rebbe would sleep in his office. And he said you were able to see if the light was on, because there was a curtain, but you were able to see from the street if the light is on. And he says it comes 2 a.m., comes 3 a.m., the Rebbe is in his late 80s, and the light's still on. And he said he knew, because he was friends with that there's a lot of mail now, and the Rebbe, he says he remembers about 3:30 a.m., he's just there, and an older woman who was a Holocaust survivor, she comes by the Rebbe's office on Eastern Parkway, like she walks on the sidewalk, and she starts screaming, she says, "Lubavitcher Rebbe, you have to take care of your health. You have to go to sleep." It's a true story. She says, "Rebbe, we need you. You have to take care of your health. And she went on and the light stayed on. And then I think he said about 5 a.m. the light went off, and 7 a.m. it was back on. So I don't know. There was also by the dollars when the Rebbe would stand. So they say, I think this is on very good source, that afterwards the Rebbe would sometimes have ice packs on his arm, because if you try to do this for 1 hour, and now try to do it when you're 90 for 6 hours and standing the whole time and looking at everyone. So there was obviously a physical toll that all this had on the Rebbe. I'm sure the Rebbe tried to keep his health, but I don't know. So I don't know the right answer. I'm just sharing some anecdotes that I know about this. Yes, but it's a great question.
Well, thank you so much, Rabbi Shmotkin. This was really illuminating. Thank you for writing this wonderful book that we all could learn from and grow from. And thank you for being here with us this night in Denver. Thank you to the rabbis Sirota for hosting us tonight. It's especially wonderful to when different shuls and organizations can join together and can bring the community together. We could only hope and pray that there could be more of this in the community at large. So thank you so much for being gracious hosts. And thank you all for coming and for asking your questions. Please take a moment to flip through the book, purchase a book, have it signed by Rabbi Shmotkin, and enjoy the wonderful desserts provided for you, and have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Once again, I just want to say thank you to Rabbi Gelman for this such thoughtful questions and discussion. Please, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Hi.
I'll get mine signed.
Yeah, let me get a. You know what? I don't have to put embarrassingly.
Thanks for watching. If you liked it, please like and subscribe to Cheshire Corners. Tell me what you think in the comments. And as always, don't get psyched out.